Welcome, Jimmy. It's great to have you with us.
Marco, it's a real pleasure to be with you today. Thanks for the invitation.
No problem, no problem. So, why don't we get started right away? Why don't you tell us about your personal background? What's your hometown? How did you grow up? What are some of the key elements that got you on the path to being where you are now?
Well, I'm at my home office in Atlanta today, and I grew up in a small rural town about 100 miles south of here, so middle Georgia.
Okay.
And, there's no stoplights, no fast food restaurants, so it's a really small area, population about 2,000. Uh,
Wow.
I guess what was a little bit unusual for me is both of my parents had college degrees, and that was
Okay.
uncommon, in that area. But I grew up in a household where education was always paramount, and
Mm.
I think that's one of the reasons that I've been successful coming from such a small town environment.
Wow, that's great. That's awesome. Well, and now you make your home in Atlanta, and you're a great representative of the city. You're involved in boards and nonprofits, and you're even a trustee and board member at your alma mater, Georgia Tech. What inspired you to give back to this community, and what did you learn from doing that in helping you grow as a leader?
Uh, Marco, I think that when I earlier in my career, I relocated to London, and so I spent about
Mm.
7 years working outside the U.S. And I came back to the U.S. in '07, and I think it just changed my perspective a little bit living outside the U.S. And I came
Mm.
back and saw some of the challenges that we had, culturally around race, uh, really around people being left behind, vulnerable communities being left behind. And my whole career has been in technology. And I have seen,
Okay.
how technology can lift people up and create opportunities. And so I had a lot of passion around that. But I also have seen how, technology can be divisive. It can be a divider. And I did not want to see people being left behind when opportunities for future growth were going to be out there. And so I think that's one of the things that got me involved a lot, really starting locally here in Atlanta, where I was living. The other thing that I had a lot of passion around was Georgia Tech. That's where I went to school. Uh, for anyone that's not a big fan of Georgia Tech, my father and grandfather went there. I didn't have a lot of choice. That was going to be it. But I've been pretty active at Georgia Tech ever since I graduated.
That's awesome. That's really great. Well, and now you're at Accenture, right? You've been there, wow, 35 years. Um, Tell us about the path to becoming the CEO. What was essential to that? What were key lessons you think that others could learn from about that? And that perseverance. What kept you there that long? I'm curious.
Well, so first of all, I appreciate your shock that I've been there that long. I know I'm a young-looking guy, and you can't imagine that I've
Exactly.
been out of college
You had
that
an
long. But
internship at age 6, right? I think.
uh, you know, I talk to people sometimes, college students, and they're thinking about careers and things, and they ask me, when did I know I wanted to go into consulting? And I said, look, I went to school at Georgia Tech. I got a degree in industrial engineering. And as I was approaching
Mm,
graduation, I really did not know what I wanted to do. All I had figured out is what I did not want. And I did not want to
mm,
be an industrial engineer. That's what I had learned. And so I began looking at other career opportunities that I would take some of the things that I loved, which was problem solving, and apply it. And so the consulting career seemed interesting to me. I love to
yeah.
learn new things, and I love variety, and that's what attracted me to consulting. So I started my career straight out of undergraduate, straight out of college, with
Wow.
a very clear plan to work for a couple of years and go back and get an MBA. And candidly, was enjoying my consulting career so much. I felt like I was learning so many things, a lot of variety of things. Marco, the first project I worked on for Accenture was in women's fashion shoes, women's shoes. And I can tell you,
Wow.
coming out of Georgia Tech with that engineering degree, I didn't really know much about women's shoes, but I did know a bit about technology and began to work with clients on how technology could solve, their business problems. And I think the two things that have kept me here for such a long period of time, for 35 years, One is that variety in experiences, which I think enables my curiosity to get applied and to learn things. And so I have learned so many things in my career. I know in the next 2 years, God willing, I'm still here in this role. I'm going to learn more things as well that I didn't know, even with all this years of experience. And then the second thing is the people. We have a wonderful culture at Accenture, a high respect for individuals, very sort of family like
Mhm.
culture. Everyone loves to roll their sleeves up and pitch in to help. And I think that's one of the other big reasons that I've always enjoyed being here and never interested in leaving.
Wow, that's great. That's great. And I think that there's a lesson there that um, folks these days, I think, sometimes think the only way to gain new experiences is to automatically to change roles and to change employers, right? And I think sadly, a lot of employers don't have opportunities for folks to learn new things. But if you do find a great experience like you did there at Accenture, and I've had in past jobs as well, that if you can manage to take on new roles, learn new skills, dive into new areas, even within the same organization, that's a way to sort of reinvigorate and re-inspire yourself, right? And even gain new skills and build your toolkit. So that's super helpful to know and to hear.
It's certainly something I have seen with my career. Now,
Mhm.
listen, Marco, I think you and I both know the odds of anyone coming out of school nowadays spending 35 years at one company are pretty low. We live in an
Yep.
environment
Yep.
now where it's much easier to move from one employer to another, or in fact to be able
Right.
to kind of change careers. But
Yeah.
it's been a wonderful experience for me. You asked about some of the lessons learned along that journey. What I'll
Yeah.
often share with people, um, there was an earlier part of my career. I was a problem solver, and so
Right.
when we had projects that were in not a good place, in a bit of trouble, I was the person that would come in to try to fix things. And
Right.
one of the things I did is I leveraged a team therapist, psychologist, who would help me interview people on the client side, on our team side, and just kind of get a feel for if we've got a dysfunctional team, what kind of interventions do I need to do? Do I need to make any changes with people or changes in the ways that we are working together? And that was really successful for me. And I had this one project I got asked to try to go in and get back on track. I brought a team psychologist in to look at and interview all of my team members. And so then she scheduled some time with me, and we sat down. I said, "Okay, great. I know this team's dysfunctional. What do I need to do to fix things?" And she said, "I'm not here to talk about the team. I'm here to talk about you. I'm here to interview you."
Wow.
And I said, "Hey, I'm not part of the problem here. I was brought in to fix the problem, right? I just got here." And she was persistent. Thank goodness. She was very persistent. And so she spent some time interviewing me. And there were two pieces of advice I got out of that, Marco, that were really transformative for me. And I always like the
Huh.
opportunity to share, with others. The first one was that I was a real multitasker. And
Uh-huh.
she helped me see the importance of being present. And there were too many
Mm,
times that I was not as present as I needed to be. And because why? Well, I'm looking at my phone. I've got other things going on. I've got the next meeting in my mind while you and I are talking here. And I began to see the power of really staying present, being present, which enabled me to be a lot more curious. And when I'm more
mm,
curious, I learn better and I'm able to add more value to the other party or parties when I'm kind of sharing perspective. And that
right.
concept of being present has been really important. The second one is she said, you've got these two little voices in your head, and one of them is very kind and says good things about what you do, and the other one is not very kind, and it's never
Right.
satisfied. It always
Right.
tells you you could have gotten up a little earlier, you could have done a little better on that presentation. And she said, you don't listen to the kind one at all. All you listen to is the one that's never satisfied. And that's part of why you've been
Huh.
successful. But it's an opportunity for you to burn out. And the other thing that I learned through that is if you're not kind to yourself, it's not so easy to be kind to other people. And that was
Right.
another sort of transformative thought because I'm like, yeah, I thought everybody has that voice that's never satisfied, that's always talking in your head. And it was
Right.
helpful for me to kind of understand that. So, as much as I have had the opportunity to learn things in this long career, at Accenture, it's interesting that two of the more transformative ideas came advice from someone that I didn't even want to have a conversation with.
Wow. Yeah. And such meaningful lessons that you learned. And thank you for sharing those with folks. 'Cause I think, yeah, those are pretty fundamental. And so great that we're able to share that with other folks who really hopefully take that to heart. Um, well, and I don't know if it was that instance, but I'm wondering if either through that or in other times in your career, have there been times where maybe you've listened to that voice too much, right? Where you've not been successful, where you've had challenges that you've had to face and overcome. Maybe you can share a little bit about that, because one of the things I think that often happens, especially with someone as successful and as accomplished as you, is people think like you can never do wrong, right? That everything is almost maybe come easy to you, and so people I think that they can never even aspire to the achievements that you have. And I've found often, right, that we're all human and that we all have
Mhm.
faults and failures even sometimes in our past. And so I'm wondering if you can share anything about ways in which you've learned, you've benefited, you've grown through maybe not being as successful or things not coming as easily.
Great question, Marco. When I'm evaluating people because I have a leadership role that I want to fill,
Mm-hmm.
often when I'm talking to them, I'll say, "What's been your biggest screw up?" And I can tell
Right.
from the look in their face, they're like, "This is sort of a trick question. How do I answer this?" And I'm
Right.
like, "I promise you, it's not a trick question. I'm just asking, what do you think your biggest mistake has been or failure has been?" And I will explain the reason I'm asking is because what I saw when I was going in to help fix projects that had gotten into trouble is people didn't ask for help, and they
Mm,
killed themselves, their teams, whatever they could to try to make something work. And finally, you know, they were not successful. And we get me coming in, and what I would see is, wow, if you would have raised your hand and asked for help a month or 2 months earlier, some of the options that would have been available for us to try to fix this thing are now more difficult to do. And what
yeah.
I would stress to these individuals is, look, for leaders that work for me, I want people that are able to grow things, grow people, grow our business, grow our relationships with our clients. And when they're
Yeah.
doing that, they're going to need to take risk. And if you're going to take risk, if you truly are taking risk, you're going to fail sometime. If you've never failed, then you're not really taking risk. And I
Mm,
need people that are okay with that. And then I will begin to share the numerous times that I have failed and learned. And that is one of the things that I think helps people get a little more comfortable, that there is a lot to learn from failure. Now, it's not always easy in today's culture to talk about those things. And it's one of the things I
right.
talk about with my teams at Accenture is we want to take more risk, is we want to do more innovation. Failing is part of that process, and learning from failing is very important. So, how do I make sure that people feel comfortable talking about failure and as a learning experience, as opposed to we're only going to talk about the successes that we have? So, it's a great question. I'm glad you asked it.
Yeah. Yeah. And thank you for sharing that. That's super helpful. Um, All right, so let's pivot a little bit and let's talk a little bit about some of the work that CHCI tries to tackle. So one of the things, as you can imagine, is that as we try to develop more Latino leaders, one of the reasons we do that is because we see that there's a need for more diversity in leadership roles, really throughout society, in all sectors, in all fields, and so on. And one of the best ways to really get a handle on that challenge is, in fact, to know if you will, the extent of the problem, shall we say, or even to at least know the lay of the land, to have the data to be able to act on. Accenture is really interesting because it was actually the first professional services company to publish comprehensive data about your U.S. workforce. You did that 5 years ago, back in 2016. So I'm wondering what led to that decision. Why did you all start to report your demographics publicly?
Well, I think a lot of it came back to our view that we want to look like the communities that we work in and the clients that
Mm-hmm.
we work with. And,
Mm-hmm.
we had a couple of aha moments, uh, 5 or 6 years ago where, we're showing up with a team of 10 or 12 people to do a pitch or a proposal with a client, and there's no diversity in that team.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of guys that look like me showing up. And for
Yeah.
clients that we're telling them, you're going to get the best of Accenture, we're going to bring all the best ideas. I think they have to be concerned. Well, if you don't have diversity, are you sure you got all the best ideas? When you tell me you've got
Yeah.
the best talent, do you really have the best talent? And so I think that's what had us begin to have some self reflection that we're not where we need to be, and that we need to take proactive steps, interventions to be able to create the diversity that we wanted. So we began to look at, well, why don't we have this diversity? The first question is, well, what are your recruiting sources? Are you
Right.
going to where you can find diverse talent? you know,
Yeah.
the second question is, are you hanging on to diverse talent? So, when you look within your organization culturally, are you doing things that make diverse people want to stay, or are you losing them? You bring them in, but then you can't keep them. And then I think
Right.
part of that and that employee experience is, are you developing people? So when you look at the numbers of people being promoted and the number of people being in leadership positions, do you see that diversity coming through? And what we saw is all of those areas needed attention, needed interventions.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Mm-hmm.
as we would advise any client, it's always important to measure things to get
Yeah.
to the outcomes that you want. So
Yeah.
we set goals, and I think we kind of locked on to 2025 as a good target spot. So we said, hey, by 2025 we're going to be 50-50 gender. And more recently, a year or so ago, we announced by 2025, we're going to increase our Hispanic American, Latinx, and African American Black representation by 60%. And
Wow.
to get to, in our case with Hispanic American, for example, 13% representation in our workforce by 2025. And
That's great.
it's always important, I think, to set metrics like that. But my passion right now is, how do we move from optics to outcomes? Really, how do we get these
Nice.
outcomes in place? And that's where we have had a lot of success looking at new sources to find talent, diverse talent, looking at new ways to develop that talent. And I think that's how we're going to get to this outcome that we want.
That's great. And are you on track then? You feel like you're making that progress to be on schedule?
We are. We announced our progress back in May, and when we finish this calendar year, again, we'll
Mm-hmm.
share publicly the progress that we're making, and so we are making good progress. I think one of the things we've done, which has been very powerful, is apprenticeships.
Uh,
So we've had more than 800 apprenticeships since we started this program 5 years ago. And Marco, with these apprenticeships, what we're doing is we're really looking at how we can bring on board people who do not have 4-year college degrees, because we've
uh-huh.
gone and looked at the roles that we're filling and really asked ourselves, do you need a 4-year degree to do this? And in many cases, we say, nope, with the proper training, you do not. And so
Yeah.
now we are recruiting much more in community colleges for talent. We did, 5 years ago, we weren't really doing that. And now it's an
Right.
incredible source of talent, and it's very diverse talent, 2/3 of it diverse. And I think that's been a real aha for us to see we can find talent in other places, and as well kind of step back and really evaluate, what are we asking people to do? How important is having a degree, or where that degree is from, and how important is it to really look at the capabilities the person has and what kind of training we can put with them to be successful in that role.
That's fantastic. That's great. That's really encouraging to hear. And hopefully, again, hopefully other employers will follow your lead and take that lesson from you. Um, uh, Speaking specifically about the Latino, Latina, the Latinx community, um, what are some of the things you all are doing to help develop that pipeline, to help open doors for our next generation of leaders? I know that Latinos are very well represented in the community colleges, so I don't know if that's you found that strategy has been part of what's yielding success, or are there any other things you're doing that you're finding are really helping you find the next future, Hispanic Jimmy for the next era of Accenture's leadership?
We're looking for that next Tommy all the time. I think that the apprentice program is a key part of it for sure. The apprentice program is really a bit more targeted at what are going to be entry level or more
Mm,
junior role. Uh,
okay.
then we're also looking at ways we can bring in more senior leadership, more
Oh,
senior
great.
Latinx leadership, and this is where there's a couple things that we're doing. One is we have a very active employee resource group, ERG.
Yeah.
Most companies, will have a series of ERGs. We have strong leaders, a real la family, family feeling to that group. I was
Yeah.
just on with our leaders kicking off our Hispanic Heritage Month yesterday, in fact. And so I get their help identifying peers that we can bring in at
Right.
more senior roles, and also their help in recruiting, because for these types of executives, they want to know, well, how diverse are the people going to be around me in these leadership roles? And so I think that's been a good success for us. Another way that we connect with, um, you know, Hispanic American, Latinx uh, people that could be good employees for us is with things that we do in the community. And so
Mm,
just recently in Minneapolis, for example, that Hispanic American ERG group partnered with a local district to address um, racial and educational disparities, and created these 7 pathway programs to kind of bring
huh.
college and career ideas and success to these public school students. And so when we're doing things like that, again, we're making connections with other business employees and executives in the community, and it gives us an opportunity to talk to them about our passion in this space, and hey, would you like to come be part of that?
That's awesome. That's great. Thank you. That's great to hear that you're tackling it at multiple levels and being so proactive. So that's awesome. Um, One of the things I wanted to ask you about is these types of conversations are becoming more and more frequent, which we think is great. But they're happening in the context of society that's evolving, that's transforming, and I believe, in fact, that over the last couple of years, in particular, these types of conversations have accelerated. And so there's much more focus now on diversity. There's much more focus on issues. We can say terms like racial justice without feeling hesitant, right, or unsure about it. People are actually really digging into what that means and how that plays out. Um, I understand that a common theme at Accenture is doing well by doing good. That's sort of part of your culture, your DNA. So, how do you think that um, uh, has informed the role that Accenture is playing in the communities you work with, and more broadly, if you have a sense, do you think that those kinds of ideas and the evolving nature of society is the role of the private sector changing, right? Are you seeing that folks are responding differently? I know there's been increased activity and commentary from, for example, the Business Roundtable about the role of the private sector. And again, it seems like you all have really been at the forefront. So I'm wondering how you're seeing all of these changes.
Well, that's a really good question, because that has been a big part of my responsibility in the CEO role, and
Mm-hmm.
increasingly is something that am spending time on. And I really look at
Yeah.
it, Marco, through 2 lenses. One is, everybody wants to be able to attract the best talent, the best diverse talent, and people today are looking for, of course, opportunities to build skills, opportunities to get compensated well. But 2 things I hear a lot is sense of purpose is important. So they want to
Yeah.
feel like they are part of something bigger than themselves, that they're able to have an impact in that way. And
Yeah.
I think for that sense of purpose, that's where we talk about, doing well and doing good. People come to Accenture because they want to do well. They want to build a great career here, but they want to do good. They want to have an impact. And that's important for us to be able to attract the talent that we want. And that's not unique to Accenture. Most of the clients and the CEOs that I have a chance to spend
Mm.
time with, it's one of the things that we talk about. The second thing is your customers. What are your customer expectations? And again, as you said, customers are caring more today about, you know, how you are dealing with social issues, how you're dealing with environmental, issues. Um, are you
Yeah.
trying to make things, better? Are you being thoughtful about that? And we implemented a year ago what we call the 360 value meter. And we rolled that out over the last year with our largest clients, where we said, look, we want to look at things like diversity and inclusion, like sustainability, like development of your people with all of the project work we're doing. So that we're not just looking at dollars, increased sales or reduced costs. We are taking into account these other things because it's important for that company's brand. It's important for their sense of purpose. And this is different, Marco, from 5 years ago. There was not as much, dialogue around that.
Yeah.
Now,
Right.
the challenge then is that I feel a lot every week, is how do I use my platform for good? How do I make a difference? How do I help make sure Accenture is doing the right things? And, when things are happening outside the four walls of Accenture, what do I comment on and what do I not? And
Yeah.
there's no way to be perfect at it. Most of the time, if I comment on something happening outside of Accenture, I'll get broadly positive emails in my inbox. I'll get a group that'll say, you shouldn't have, why are you talking about this? This is an Accenture's business. And I'll get a group that'll
Yeah.
say, Jimmy, why didn't you talk more about this? Why weren't you more aggressive in what you said? So,
Yeah.
it's always hard to keep everybody happy in such a diverse environment. But
Yeah.
one of our core values is respect for the individual. And with that, what we believe is you have to have dialogue around
Yep.
difficult things. And you have to have
Yep.
respectful dialogue, without judgment around difficult things. And we have forums that we try to, talk about, issues. We had with George Floyd's murder. There's a lot of discussion around that. El Paso shooting. We had a
Yeah.
lot of discussion around that. And so, things happen that affect people outside of Accenture. And if you
Yeah.
don't talk about those things, though, when you come to work, it's hard to be your authentic self. You're having to put a mask on or kind of hide that. And I think our people perform best when they can be their authentic selves. So we want to create an environment for that.
That's great. No, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that and for the work that you're doing, for that role that you're playing, because I know it makes a difference, not just for your folks at Accenture, but really, I think that's the kind of leadership we need, right, in society. And so definitely we appreciate you stepping up in that way and showing up in that way. And I think, again, our leaders will benefit from it. Well, we're coming up on time, but if I thought we could end on a bit of a lighter note with a bit of a lightning round, if you will, with a couple of short questions that just curiosity that we have about sort of, again, sort of some of the more daily life things of some of our most distinguished leaders. So if you're game, just a couple of quick questions. First, simply, what's one of the best books you've read recently?
Best book I've read recently. I read Hillbilly Elegy, and it was
Hmm.
really fascinating to see some of the cultural challenges in part of the sort of center of the country.
Yeah,
It's something I really enjoyed and learned a lot.
that's great. Good. What's an app on your phone that you just can't live without?
App on my phone I can't live without.
or
I
you
would
check the
say,
most maybe?
uh, um, you know, I'm always looking at my Wall Street Journal business feed to see what announcements any of my clients have made. So I probably check that thing as much as I do anything.
Staying on top of your business. I like it. I like it. And then lastly, given that, this is, I think, the number one question that gets asked as people start to reemerge and socialize. What's one of the best things you watched from home over these last couple of years while we've been under quarantine?
Uh, I'm kind of a documentary guy. I like,
Okay.
watching documentaries on things. This past week, I watched a number of documentaries around 9/11 because with the 20th anniversary of
Right.
9/11, it just was really,
Yeah.
powerful to see. I would say the most entertaining documentary I have seen over the COVID was the Tiger King. You see this Tiger
Oh,
King
okay.
documentary, Marco?
Yep. Yeah. Yep.
Uh,
Yep. Yep.
it
You
just
and a
goes
lot
to
of folks.
show, life is stranger than fiction. That's all I could say about that.
Indeed, indeed, indeed. Well, thank you so much for spending time with us, Jimmy. Again, it's really been insightful. It's been really helpful. It's been inspiring, in fact, even for me. So I'm really grateful for all of your insights, your comments, and the role that you're playing. So we wish you the best of luck. We thank you for being here with us, and we hope to stay in touch and to hear from you again soon.
Marco, thanks very much. And again, thanks for your leadership and all the wonderful impacts that you're having for so many people.
Well, thank you all for joining us for this installment of our Lessons from the C-Suite series here at the 2021 Leadership Conference. We hope you've enjoyed everything you've heard and keep an eye out for more of these installments, more of these insights from some of the most outstanding leaders in our society. Please enjoy the rest of the conference and be sure to tune in and watch our 44th Annual Awards Gala on Thursday, September 23rd at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Until then, we'll see you all soon.